On Sunday, Manchester City began their 2024-25 Premier League campaign with a 2-0 victory over Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Erling Haaland opened the scoring by bursting through the Chelsea defence, muscling past Cucurella and placing the ball past Robert Sanchez. Chelsea then kept the visitors at bay for the rest of the first half and the majority of the second. However, former Chelsea midfielder Mateo Kovacic settled the game on 84 minutes when he walked through Chelsea midfield and fired a long-range strike into the net, with Sanchez getting a hand to it but failing to keep it out. Here are the key talking points from the game. Alright then, let's talk about Chelsea versus Manchester City. I think it's important to preface this by saying that I don't think this is going to be a negative video. I don't think Chelsea's performance was necessarily negative, and I think that while a lot of fans will be keen to ensure that we're winning games and we're playing positively, I still think that the result against City was, or at least the performance against City, was a good one.
Yeah, I think so. Realistically, and also I know, the 4-4 draw at home last season, I don't think you can compare that. That was a weird game. 4-4 is never a normal result.
We didn't lose to City in the league last season. We drew the other game 1-0. So.
And maybe that is something to be said there, but equally, a 2-0 loss to Man City with the turmoil and all the problems going on at Chelsea off the pitch, to give City a game is a positive thing, really.
The fact for me is that we matched them in possession. The big difference was what happened in the penalty area. In that Manchester City took their chances and Chelsea didn't. And we've seen that come up time and time again. But the really positive thing for me is that Chelsea looked comfortable on the ball, looked good building out from the back. And we're going to touch on those big positives in a moment. Let's start with what went wrong.
Yeah.
Because we're going to have a look at what City did really well. Now, the first thing is something that you have to put down to the ingenuity of Pep Guardiola. Because a lot of teams have been pressing or have been out of possession in a 4-2-4 shape. Because, it's the new craze. Everyone loves doing it now. It sort of derived from Unai Emery's 4-4-2 type shape where you sit in a mid-block. Now it's quite an aggressive pressing structure to have that 4. That 2 midfield can be very isolated, and Guardiola has done very well to break through it. So he used a 3-4-3 type shape. So we'll put a graphic on screen now that sort of demonstrates that. And what you can see is that they have a lot of width with those wide players. So you've got Jeremy Doku on the left-hand side, Savinho on the right-hand side, or Savio, depending on whether you're going to call him his new name or not. And that gives you obviously a lot of width, which means it's very difficult for the opposition to mark both those wide options. So it stretches that pitch a lot. And what you'll notice about Caicedo and Romeo Lavia, that double pivot that Chelsea were playing, is that they're very spread and that it leaves a lot of Manchester City players open.
Yeah, and that is... I think what this shows is Pep Guardiola being a step ahead of the game, like he usually is. He went into this game up against Maresca, similar to how he would against Arteta, really. He knew that because Maresca plays very similar football to Pep, he'd have to come up with something that could beat him. And what did he go and do? He came up with that thing.
Yeah, and obviously then you look at that front 4 for Chelsea and you'd think, they outnumber that Man City back 3 or situational back 3 type thing, so they should be able to press them quite effectively. But City play through that first line of pressure quite easily, and then suddenly they've got a huge overload in midfield, because you look at that and you look at Rico Lewis, who's inverted into there, you've got De Bruyne, who's dropped in, you've got Bernardo Silva, you've got Kovacic, and there's 4 players there buzzing around, making options, creating space, and Caicedo and Lavia just stood there. At times, it's very difficult to catch up on those players. And then if you look at that first goal, you can see where it all goes wrong for Chelsea. Caicedo tries to go out to... This frustrated me because I thought Caicedo had a really good game, but this frustrated me because he goes out to try and deal with Doku.
Yeah.
He stands off him and lets him cut inside. And as you can see on this graphic, you've then got Caicedo just stood in no man's land. You've got Gusto, who has sort of dropped into the back line, is kind of close to De Bruyne, but not really. And Doku's got all of this space to drive into inside. So it's a frustrating one for me. And then he just plays a pass into the middle. I don't think the touch from Bernardo was necessarily meant to be a fantastic pass, but it worked out, found its way to Haaland. And obviously Haaland took that goal really well. And this is that Haaland goal is where individual quality makes a difference. Yeah. Because that's obviously it's the cut inside from Doku, it's the run from Bernardo Silva. He started really deep, he built up the play, plays it wide into Doku, and what he does very, very well is he keeps going forward. He keeps running. Yeah. He doesn't stop there. He obviously goes and makes that run into the box. That then leads to City's goal. On the actual strike, a lot of people have been aiming criticism at Cucurella. Do you think that's fair, or do you think that comes down to individual quality? Haaland is very difficult to deal with.
It's a hard one because, Haaland is nearly twice the size of the bloke. And that was the main thing, really. Realistically, Cucurella wasn't going to win that battle. Haaland kind of just shrugged him off without a sweat really, and I think that the main problem is that Cucurella has said all this, all that about Haaland's scared, and then just bang, and he's on the it was too easy. I think the frustrating thing around the goal was that it was brilliant from City, yes, but from a Chelsea point of view, it was very preventable. Caicedo, it is criminal to let Doku cut inside. One of the most dangerous players when he cuts in. If you see him out, you avoid the thing. If someone follows Bernardo Silva's run, you then cut that bit out. So for Chelsea, I think it was a frustrating one to concede, especially when they were in the game. It was an even contest, and then, as you say, individual quality shone through. Chelsea had a lapse defensively, and City got their goal.
Yeah, and the even more frustrating thing is if you're thinking about Jeremy Doku, the best way to deal with him is to show him wide.
Yeah,
he's not left-footed, so yes, he could cross the ball, but it's not going to be as dangerous if he cuts inside and either has a shot or lays it into Erling Haaland. So it's a frustrating one. It's avoidable, but it's not the worst way to concede against the best team in the world.
I mean, and also the other thing was, again, hats off to Guardiola, or whoever's decision it was, to swap Doku and Savinho back, because obviously Doku started on the right and was quiet because he's not a byline go wide and use his right foot winger. They put him on the other side, and it worked immediately.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so what went wrong in other areas? I think the fullbacks both really struggled. It seemed that the Chelsea fullbacks couldn't mark the 1v1s. And if we go back to that first graphic, we can put that on the screen again. What you can see is that the fullbacks are very isolated out in those wide areas, and they've got a lot of space to cover. There's a lot of space in behind those fullbacks, and so what that means is that the winger's got a lot of choice and a lot of time.
Yeah.
And that's really difficult, therefore, for Cucurella or Gusto to mark those players. And a lot of it was because City were so wide, it meant that Chelsea's defence was getting stretched, those fullbacks were getting pulled wide, and then they were stuck in those 1v1 situations, and clearly there hadn't been much work on defending 1v1s, because Cucurella really struggled up against Savio. I think Savio was really good. He didn't show it in terms of goal contributions, but he looked really good. Scarily similar to Mares. Just in the look, obviously, I think he's got the same number as well, number 26. So there's the parallels are there, and he looked really, really good. Obviously, he came off at half time for Foden, and I do think they lost a lot of their control when Foden came on because he's not as good as holding that width. But yeah, I think it's a really good system that Pep Guardiola plays, shockingly. But yeah, I do think Chelsea struggled in those 1v1s. The other thing I was going to say is that unbalance in midfield. I think it makes sense to go for the midfield three of Enzo, Lavia and Caicedo when you're playing Manchester City. That gives you a lot of defensive stability. What I would expect to see is when we're playing against higher quality opposition is that attacking midfielder is either Palmer or Nkunku. That allows you to have more transitional threats. I do think Chelsea's transitional threat was strong, but I think it gives you more if you have if you have an attacking player rather than Enzo Fernandez, because I've got a lot of question marks around Enzo. We're going to put his numbers up on the screen now. I don't know what he does, is my frustration with Enzo Fernandez, because you could play him in defence midfield, but he can't really build up from deep, and he's not a great tackler. You can play him higher, but he doesn't create any chances, and he doesn't score goals. What does he do? Like £100 million, and it's frustrating because you feel you've got to play a £100 million player, but I don't know what he does. He had one good tournament at the World Cup and a good 6 months at Benfica. He profiles well on FBref. That doesn't make him an incredible footballer. He hasn't performed well in a Chelsea shirt. I just don't know what to do with him. And yet the fans adore him, but I don't personally understand it. I don't see what he does. It was
a really weird one. Once again, it felt like Todd Bowley decided to jump on a bandwagon after one good World Cup. He got his wallet out, and we've seen that so many times under his era at Chelsea. It was a bit of a bizarre one. I think. Yeah, as you say, I don't think there's one thing he does incredibly. I think he's decent all round. But the thing is, that is £100 million on a decent all round player. That's not a good price at all. For a player that just does a bit of everything, £100 million is too much. But I mean, so that doesn't help. But yeah, I think my frustration on Sunday was it was just sloppy from Enzo. The misplaced passes were frustrating at times because Chelsea did the hard bit. They played out, they got it into Enzo, and that final pass to Nkunku, that final pass to Jackson or Palmer or whoever it was just miles off it. And it was frustrating because I think it cost Chelsea a lot of chances to get forward.
Yeah, Chelsea just don't take enough shots. Enzo managed to have 7 touches in the opposition box and only took 3 shots. And then it didn't create any chances. So what is he doing with those other touches? That's what concerns me. I just don't think he can play in the attacking midfield role. I think Enzo can be a very good player, but he only really works in a 3-man midfield. And because Chelsea play with a double pivot and attacking midfielder, I don't really see where he fits. I think he can play in the pivot, but not against Manchester City.
No.
And I don't think he can play attack midfield against many teams because he doesn't unlock defences, he doesn't score goals, he doesn't offer much in there. And Palmer in central areas is an incredibly dangerous player.
Yeah.
And so I don't see how you can take him out the side. So it's an interesting one, but for me, you have to play Palmer and Nkunku in that central role.
But also in games like City and other games, you need that attacking midfielder to get you 15 yards further up the pitch. Whether that's a brilliant pass or an incredible run, we've seen Palmer do it so many times. You know, he can take you from one end to the other, and suddenly the narrative of the game is completely different. When Enzo plays a sloppy pass, or he's not going to drive 15 yards up the pitch. That's not what he does, and so I don't know. I think Chelsea cost themselves a little bit. I'm not saying you can, because you can't bench him, obviously, but I think it cost Chelsea a little bit in there.
Yeah, fair enough. I think Chelsea have a huge issue at the moment with squad depth because the depth is actually really strong. How do you decide double pivot out of Lavia, Caicedo, Enzo Fernandez? They're 3 players who will want to start a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
There are a lot of minutes to go around this season, though, so I think that is a rotation you can make work. I think against sides that you want to have where you are a bit more dominant, you can play a Lavia Fernandez pivot, and Lavia can be that single pivot, and you can allow Enzo to get higher a little bit. Or if you're playing a team that you do need to be a little bit more defensively solid, you can play Lavia and Caicedo and you get that balance. For me, though, what emerged from the City game is that Lavia is undroppable.
He was
immense in that game.
Best player on the pitch
if
for
we
Chelsea.
turn up against Wolves and we suddenly have an Enzo Caicedo pivot, I will be very surprised.
Yeah.
Because I thought Lavia was absolutely phenomenal. So, yeah, let's touch quickly on Cole Palmer as well, because you mentioned him there. Quiet game for Palmer against Man City. Do you think that's just because he didn't have a pre-season?
Yeah,
or because he was in the right wing? Is that a contribution?
Well, I think
a couple of factors.
I think it's a bit of both, and obviously it's a really hard decision as a manager, because you've got one of your best players, if not the best player of the team, who you know isn't fit enough and you know isn't ready to play, and that was evident to see with Palmer. Clearly, he was not match fit. He was not ready to play in the Premier League. For me, that would trump quality, because I like Palmer. I think he's a phenomenal player, but if he was only at 40-50% on Sunday, and that was a complete waste for Chelsea because he just couldn't impact the game at all. I think especially obviously I'm not Neto'd only been at the club for a couple of days, but you've got Madueke, Mudryk, you can shuffle things around in that front line if you need to, and then maybe if Palmer came on with half an hour to go, he would have had an impact because he'd have still been the fittest player on the pitch. So I think it was a weird one to play him. I really do. You see City, they benched Foden. They only gave him 45 minutes in the second half. They were smart with it. Palmer played 95 minutes. That for me is crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think that's fair. I do think Chelsea have a bit of a conundrum at the moment with that right wing position because they're trying to force Madueke out, which doesn't make any sense because he seems to be our best right winger. So Chelsea logic for you. Obviously, with Maresca's system, I know Neto tends to play on the right wing, but I think he'll play on the left wing, where he can be more of an out-and-out winger, meaning that you need a right-footed player on the right wing. Now, obviously, you could put Mudryk there, but he's never played the role before. He's never played on the right wing, and it just feels like Chelsea have completely forgotten to sign right wingers.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We're signing João Felix, which is something we're going to talk about in Friday's video, so we won't touch on that now, but it's another left winger, another right-footed left winger, who I guess could play on the right wing.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll find out what Maresca going to do in the coming weeks. But yeah, let's talk about something else. Missed chances for Chelsea, because as I said earlier, I think the big difference in the game, both sides were very good in possession, both sides built up well, got into attacking areas. I think Chelsea had a really strong transitional threat, but the big difference for me is that one team took their chances, Manchester City. They scored their 2 goals. We haven't really touched on the second goal, Kovacic strike from range, which, while it's a reductionist take, it is symbolic when Chelsea's 100-odd million pound, 200-odd million pound midfield gets opened up by a player they sold for 25 million.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, it is reductionist, but I did find that somewhat symbolic. But yeah, great strike from him. Robert Sanchez.
Well,
think the less said about him, the better. Yeah. For me, Jorgensen should be the starting goalkeeper going forwards. But there is chances for Chelsea. 45th minute, Jackson's offside goal. The frustration for me with this one is that Jackson finally found some composure in front of goal, and it is the only time he didn't get his timing right.
Yeah.
He's so good at timing the runs in behind, and then he misses. And the time he scores, he's offside.
Yeah, I think Daniel Sturridge put it perfectly. It's just about awareness. I understand if Jackson is the closest player to the near side, to the line, linesman. But he was behind everyone. He could have looked along the line. He could see the last defender. He just had to drop a yard, and he'd still got to the ball. He'd have still scored the goal. It's just about having that game awareness, and that was it was a really frustrating one because again it had been an even contest, an even half. I think 1-1 at half time would have been pretty fair. Yeah. But it just feels like it's for Jackson, it's just not going to work, is it? Either he makes a brilliant run, he's onside and he smashes it over the bar, or he makes
out for a throw,
and then he makes a brilliant finish, a nice composed finish, and he's offside.
Yeah, and let's fast forward to the 61st minute then, the ball bouncing in the box. This was the succession of headers. It fell to Jackson, who was at a point blank range, and he flicked it up at Ederson. For me, I know a lot of people will be like, oh, he's flicked it right at the goalkeeper. I don't think he could have done much more of that. I think he did very well to even turn that on target. It's just more frustration because it was well kept alive by Chelsea and it almost went in.
It was the header from, was it Fofana? Or I can't remember now. He made this, but it was the perfect weighted header for Jackson, and he's done well to turn around and flick it goalwards. I think the frustrating thing is if he puts, because he's so close to the goal, if he puts it anywhere else in the goal frame, it's a goal. Yeah, because Ederson couldn't react to it because the ball was too close. He was probably 4 or 5 yards away from the goal line. He put it in the one place where Ederson could save it.
Yeah, very true. I think there's still, for me, I know a lot of Chelsea fans will disagree with this take, but I still think there's a lot I want to see from Jackson. I think that there is still so much potential there. He's a very lively player, he's a very active player, and when his movement and timing and his positioning is quite good. I mean, in this game he didn't show it because he was offside for the one chance he had, or one of the couple chances he had. But he does get into really good positions, and he does get into goal scoring opportunities. It's just that he lacks that composure at times. But 14 goals in his first running season wasn't bad. If he can better that this season while missing less big chances, he's going to have a really strong season.
And I think what will help Jackson and Chelsea is that he will not be solely relied on to find the goals up front. Because I think it will help Jackson find the back of the net more often. If because you can bring on Guiu, or Guiu can start, and then Jackson can come on. Palmer will also, hopefully, he'll have the same kind of season he did, and Kunku's could have a Neto. Chelsea have now got players that can find the back of the net as well. Yeah. So it's not just going to be relying on Jackson to score goals, because the problem is when you rely on him as your number 9 and he misses, it makes him look worse than he is, because it's like he's the number 9, he needs to score our goals. But when you've got other strikers that you can now throw into the mix, you've got better wingers, you've got other attacking forwards who can find the back of the net, it takes that pressure off Jackson. And as we've seen so many times with different strikers, if you take the pressure off, they score more goals.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate too much, but Osimhen linked, is that something you think would be an improvement for Chelsea? I still think there's doubts there, but do you think that would be an improvement?
I don't know. I'm not. I wouldn't be a fan of it if it was to happen. I think because realistically it'll end up being a big fee for a player that, don't get me wrong, has looked really good in Italy, but will he make that jump across and do well in England? Chelsea, the one thing Chelsea needs to stop doing is throwing money at big players and then it not working. Or even if it does work, the price never will be outweighed by the performance. When you've got Jackson, you've got Guiu, these are strikers that can do the job as well as your attacking areas. I don't think Osimhen's a need. I think it's a want. I think it's a greed again from Chelsea, really.
I wouldn't be surprised if Chelsea made the move because of the fans' clamour for a striker. There is a real clamour around Stamford Bridge for a striker. Every time you talk to Chelsea fans, we need a striker. We need someone who's going to put the ball in the back of the net. And I think this game in particular, where we were level with City in every other statistic but those chances finished off, I think that will be where that frustration comes in. But
I guess.
But yeah, I do think Chelsea did play quite well. Let's talk about what went well for Chelsea then. I think in build-up, they were quite successful. I think building out from the back, that was something that we didn't really see under Pochettino, but I did think it went quite well. Talking statistics as well, Chelsea were not far off Manchester City in that game, actually. Possession wasn't too far off, 48% to 52%. That's the closest it's been in the last 4 seasons. If we look at that graphic, Last season in the 4-4 draw, it was 45% to 55%. In the FA Cup 1-0 defeat, it was 38% to 52%. No, the maths don't work on that. 62%. And then in the 1-1 draw in November, it was 30% to 70%. I mean, that was quite far off. But in all those games, you can see Chelsea obviously competing with Manchester City, and this one competing once again, but on that possession front this time.
Very few sides are practically even with Man City with the ball. The one thing Man City have always been known for is having a lot more of the ball than the opposition. For Chelsea and for Maresca to be able to challenge City possession-wise is a positive thing, because although City still won the game and they still took their chances, it is that simple thing. Even though City had, technically they had more of the ball, but only by 2%.
Well, 4%, but yeah.
It would even out. But the big thing is you've still limited them to less possession than they used to, which means they're going to have less chances.
Yeah, and if we look at the statistics from the game, obviously you see that 48 to 52% possession. The expected goals tally, 1.01 for Chelsea, 0.77. And that's where we talk about that individual quality making the difference. Chelsea didn't take their chances, Manchester City did. Total shots, 10 to 11 in favour of Manchester City. That's not a huge difference there. 3 to 5 shots on target. Again, for Chelsea, it's about getting those chances on target. So many they just didn't challenge Edison with. City had more shots on target. City scored more goals. It seems to be fairly simple math. They both had one big chance each. City scored 2 goals from one big chance. Chelsea scored none. And that, for me, is the key difference. 26 touches in the opposition box to 27. Very marginal difference. So Chelsea competed with Manchester City in that game. And actually looked really good on the ball. I think they're also very dangerous in transition. We spoke about that a couple of times in this video, or briefly in this video, but I think this is a real weakness of City, is that they are a little bit too open defensively. I mean, we looked at that shape earlier, where in a 3-4-3 and Chelsea are pressing in a 4. It means if Chelsea get the ball forwards or win it high up the pitch, they've got 4 on 3 and suddenly they've got an overload and they should be able to work that into a goal scoring opportunity. They didn't, but there were times, and I think a fully fit Palmer, or a fresh Palmer, and players around him who understand the tactic very well, would have scored goals in that game, because we did have opportunities where we were driving forwards and we were looking good. So I think we did do well. Penalty shouts as well. We will briefly mention them. I think the Fernandes push was not. I think even if you think that's a push, the contact starts outside the box. I don't think it's enough for a penalty. The Nkunku one, it was a bit too messy to pass a fair judgment on. I think it was a tangle of bodies in the box. They didn't even show a replay on Sky, so they just cut to half time and then forgot about it. Forgot what happened. And then the Kovacic handball, 67 minutes around there. I see absolutely no way it's not a penalty. I hope that, for me though, if that is the precedent set, if that is not a penalty anymore, that's fine. But then that has to be the precedent for every decision now. Yeah. Because last season that's given, and if we're going forward and that's not a penalty, then that's okay. Because I don't think, like, Kovacic didn't mean to handball it. The shot, we weren't going. It wasn't a shot on target. It wasn't a shot towards goal. It was a cross. But if that's the precedent now, where if it is in that position, it's not a penalty, then that's fine. That's not a penalty. And my issue is that won't be a consistent rule. It will change every week, because that's what the referees do.
I mean, because the two things were your close proximity, which I don't believe for a second, that there wasn't a big enough gap for me. Yeah, but the main thing was for me, because apparently it's a natural running motion. Because, obviously having your arm up there isn't a natural position, because you don't stand like that. But apparently with Kovacic was running, his arm is not up there. You don't run around with your arm up here. It's rubbish.
I find the whole natural position rule bizarre, because nothing about football is a natural. Like, what is a natural football position? It doesn't make any sense.
It was a bizarre one. It's Taylor, Chelsea. I don't get it. Anthony Taylor and Chelsea. It just adds fuel to the fire that is Taylor.
I don't know why
has an agenda against Chelsea. Yeah. It's utterly ridiculous. But realistically, that didn't change the game. That didn't impact the result. So I'm not really too. If City won 1-0 just through that Haaland goal, then I think a lot more Chelsea fans would have been frustrated with the decision to not give a penalty there. But because City, were winning the game, I don't think it would have impacted the game too massively. But that's not the point of what the argument is. The argument is the consistency of it. It doesn't matter if City would have still won the game. It doesn't matter if City had gone on to win the game, even if Chelsea had got the penalty. It's the fact that it wasn't given.
Yeah, Fair enough. Let's look ahead then up to their next games. Manchester City face Ipswich Town at the Etihad this weekend.
They'll be all right.
I think they I was going to say I think they will continue to win. I do think that Ipswich looked quite good in the Liverpool game. However, it took Liverpool time to get going, and once Liverpool did get going, they could have had 4 or 5.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a guarantee that Ipswich will get absolutely battered this weekend, but if it is 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7, I wouldn't be hugely surprised.
No,
I think that City looked really strong, and Greaves and Wolfenden up against Erling Haaland, he could hit 5 himself.
Yeah, mate.
So I do worry for Ipswich this weekend. I think City will have it easy. More interestingly though, Chelsea coming up next, Servette on Thursday. Obviously that will be, again, they'll be hoping to win. That's the home leg of the Conference League qualification. It's a game they shouldn't have any issues in. It's a game I hope we see a lot of rotation. I hope we see a lot of young players. I think Mark Guiu will hopefully start. Maybe players like Dewsbury Hall could get some starting minutes. That for me would be nice. Even Carney Shaq-Wemmick been included in the squad, so we might see him. I thought he was going to leave. Potentially not. And obviously Wolves coming up this Sunday.
Huge game.
Yeah. What was it the weekend? How did they get on?
They lost to Arsenal,
of course,
which is hard to judge. Only losing 2-0 to Arsenal isn't a bad result. But for Chelsea, it's a must-win. It is a must-win because the Servette one would be nice to get a win on the board. If that's not a win, then that's inexcusable. The Wolves is a must-win for Maresca's sake, because if Chelsea win that and they play well, then suddenly the City game is, that was just Manchester City. If Chelsea do not beat Wolves at the weekend, then suddenly there is huge pressure on Maresca already. And that's the problem, is that he's under pressure from 2 games. But that's what being a manager in the Premier League is. Being an unproved manager in the Premier League, that needs to be a win for Chelsea.
I think it's more being a manager at Chelsea right now, where there is such animosity towards the ownership, towards the people making decisions at the club. I think that Chelsea fans are frustrated, and understandably so in some cases. But actually, Maresca could prove himself here. And if he gets off to a winning start, it will do a lot to encourage the Stamford Bridge faithful. So that for me could be huge. I don't think Wolves looked good against Arsenal, but obviously it is Arsenal. I thought Yerson Mosquera looks physically good, but he looks a bit of a car crash. He kept almost giving away penalties against Arsenal, and I don't think they have much attacking threat without Matthias Cunha. They haven't really replaced Neto. I don't think Strand Larsen's ready for the Prem. So in that regard, Chelsea should be beating Wolves this weekend, but this is Chelsea Football Club. Who knows what's going to happen this Saturday.
Exactly that.
But I guess we'll see. I think that's about everything though for today's video. I hope you have enjoyed. Obviously this Friday, as I mentioned at some point in this video, we will be talking about João Felix, so look out for that and what it represents about Chelsea's whole recruitment strategy, so look out for that on Friday. That is expected to be announced today. And obviously if you haven't checked out a video from Monday yet, we spoke about Liverpool and Ipswich, that'll be on screen now, so if you want to see us analyse that, go and check that out. But that's everything from us today. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.